I'm so proud to stand here and reject liberal post-nationalism, reject everything that the Liberals have done to erode the value of citizenship, erode the value of our democratic institutions, and fight. I will stand here and fight for what is right. You know, my colleague opposite has a lot of shame to wear for all the years that he stood by and actively helped erode our national identity, erode our military, erode our national institutions.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends, a real change.
Broken, Canada's broken, and Canada's broken because we're stupid, okay? Canada's broken because we're stupid.
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain.
How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein?
More than just elbows.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. We've got Michelle Rempel Garner going to deliver an epic speech. Like, share, subscribe, get your Canadian federal politics right here. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics. Michelle Rempel Garner is going to give you a couple of hers. She's the shadow critic, the shadow minister of immigration, and she is articulate in this one. And she gets right to the point. Canadian identity. Are they trying to take it away from us? She's going to get deep into it, and Liberal voters, you want to pay attention to this one because the Liberals expose themselves. Again, they don't show this on the news. Get your Canadian federal politics right here, or another independent. Like, just get real information. The news doesn't provide that. Let's take a look at this.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
But all those reforms were reversed and far exceeded after Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took office in 2015. Essayists discussing Trudeau Jr.'s famous 2015 post-nationalism quote that there is, quote, no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, often forget that he didn't just say those words. He operationalized them through a decade of socialist-oriented post-nationalist policies. So much so that his fervent focus on abolishing Canadian national identity may be remembered as the most enduring aspect of his legacy. On immigration, the Trudeau Liberals narrowed the age range for mandatory language requirements in citizenship applications, thus diminishing shared language roles in the Canadian identity for newcomers. They eliminated in-person citizenship oath requirements. They sought to erase references to practices like female genital mutilation as abhorrent in the Canadian Citizenship Study Guide, arguably normalizing their importation into Canada. They turned a blind eye to judicial rulings allowing immigration status to factor into sentencing violent criminals, valuing the process of entry into the country over the responsibilities associated with citizenship. They allowed Canada's compassionate asylum system to be abused into a mockery, and thus we have the bill in front of us today. The Trudeau Liberals have also normalized the practice of importation of conflicts from newcomers' countries of origin, rather than primarily encouraging the shedding of those quarrels in favor of a pluralistic, united Canadian identity rooted in Western democratic values. This phenomenon is best exemplified by the Trudeau government's tolerance of diasporic lobby groups' influence in elections and Canadian institutions, while simultaneously turning a blind eye to groups who sought to plant international conflicts and even terrorist principles in Canadian soil. And despite clear evidence of rising foreign interference in elections, the Liberals have yet to implement a foreign agent registry. The Trudeau Liberals have also prioritized cultural and ethnic differences over a shared ethos of equality in hiring and storytelling. For example, they embedded divisive, quasi-racist hiring policies into federal funding for educational institutions. They allowed Canada's publicly funded national broadcaster to consider abandoning objectivity for racialized narratives. And now, they allocate news funding based on whether or not outlets sufficiently highlight ethnic, religious, or other group differences. Rather than enlisting newcomers to help strengthen a cohesive national identity, such as by constructively addressing the nation's historic injustices, while simultaneously celebrating its positive achievements, the Trudeau Liberals actively erase symbols of shared historic Canadian identity from public view. They redesigned the Canadian passport to replace images of Canadian national heroes like Terry Fox with inert objects like a wheelbarrow. They supported activities that established the Canadian flag as a symbol of shame, as opposed to a representation of patriotism. And they worked to erase Canada's founders from places of prominence. Thus, Canada's political left has profoundly succeeded in transforming Canada into a post-national no-nation, free from the trappings of cohesive national identity. And for those who might argue that this was a good thing, they are very, very wrong. What Justin Trudeau overlooked in his Liberal government's zealous pursuit of post-nationalism is that his father's multicultural vision could only thrive under robust Western democratic institutions. Without a government prioritizing above all else, especially over partisan ideology, the safeguarding of principles like freedom of speech, secularism, the equality of opportunity, multiculturalism, will inevitably destroy a peaceful and democratic nation. The proof is in the pudding. Today, in Canada, after decades of post-national national identity-destroying policies, less than half of Canadian youth say they would fight for our country. This marks a startling shift from generations ago when Canadians fought for what seemed to be immutable freedoms in great wars. Diasporic conflicts now erupt on Canadian streets, hate crimes against ethnic and religious groups have surged, and the once strong Canadian consensus on immigration has been solidly broken by this government. If Canadians want to reverse the pluralism-destroying course liberal post-nationalism has set us on, everyone, regardless of political stripe in this place, must acknowledge that post-nationalism has eroded Canada's national identity to the point of non-existence. That state of affairs is likely the biggest threat to our sovereignty today, no other nation included. History proves this conclusion correct. For a civilization to survive the test of history, it needs some sort of cohesive shared identity. Without it, collapse occurs. There's even examples to be found within Canada's own evolution in the 20th century. In the early 1900s, a Canadian national identity had taken root in spite of high levels of immigration. Forged in the crucibles of battlefields like Vimy Ridge, peoples of many backgrounds fought together as Canadians, united by shared values of democracy, rule of law, bilingualism, and loyalty to the Crown. To be Canadian, then, was to embrace English or French as a primary language, respect parliamentary institutions, and demonstrate civic duty through collective efforts in war and nation building. Fast forward to today. Our domestic efforts failed to build critical national infrastructure, have allowed our military to atrophy to the point of near non-functionality. Our foreign policy rewards the tactics of terrorist organizations and abandons Western allies in times of crisis. Logic dictates that if the Liberal government continues eroding the Western democratic values that once, but arguably no longer, underpin Canada's rapidly disappearing pluralistic national identity, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and equality in the rule of law's application, then collapse is what should be expected of Canada's once vaunted pluralism. Those looking for remedy from today's Prime Minister, the Liberal Prime Minister that sits here today, will be disappointed, as evidenced by the fact that he put forward a bill like this in front of this place and then gutted amendments on things like language requirements. Long an adherent to the World Economic Forum's globalist blend of post-nationalism, the best definition of Canada's national identity the current Prime Minister has managed to muster was this: we're not the United States. His new Minister of National Identity managed an arguably worse response, offering pithiness like, I won't stand here and pretend that I can tell you what a Canadian is or what it should be. That neither could define Canadian identity as rooted in shared respect for things like the rule of Western-based law, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and equality of opportunity is telling. Nor could they talk about the supremacy of this place and that the fact that we here, who represent all of the Canadians in this country and abroad, have the right to challenge court rulings and to set law. And that is a core part of what we do to strengthen Canadian national identity. The reality is, for the current Liberal Prime Minister, is that his government must reverse the many changes his predecessor made under their aggressive post-national doctrine in order to rebuild Canada's national identity, prevent pluralism's collapse, and to retain Canadian sovereignty. How can we talk about things that are in the national interest if the government can't define what the national interest is? If he fails, if this Liberal Prime Minister fails, the effect will be the same as if he were to tip over that art installation I spoke about in the National Gallery, a shameful and purposeful squandering of an intricate and delicate masterpiece. And that is why I stand here and oppose this bill. There should be no citizens of convenience. If somebody is to be a citizen of this country, they should be able to speak one of Canada's official languages. They should have a clear and demonstrated ability to understand that the responsibility of Canadian citizenship is to uphold our democratic institutions. And how can we measure that, colleagues? Through a citizenship test. The Liberals gutted that amendment that we made at our committee. You know, the fact that the government put a bill forward after not challenging a lower court ruling on something as vital as the value of Canadian citizenship and who should be eligible for that is bananas. It says that they don't give a rip about Canada's national identity, and it reconfirms the current Prime Minister's continuation of a post-national doctrine. You know, colleagues, we have been in a period of time where we have, especially with the trade situation that we find ourselves with our neighbors to the south, and we have the Prime Minister talking about, well, we need to have nation-building initiatives and whatnot, but he can't even talk about what Canada's national identity is. The only thing I've heard this Prime Minister talk about is the fact that we're not American. Well, then what are we? Colleagues, there's very clear definitions of what it could mean to be Canadian. Even in Canada's citizenship guide right now, there isn't a cohesive definition. But I think certainly on this side, we could manage a definition that was rooted in pride, in democratic institutions, and in how to maintain a pluralism, how to maintain a multiculturalism through respect for the rule of law. Colleagues, what we have seen through this government is the denigration of Canada's democratic institutions. The Supreme Court ruling this week on child pornography, censorship bills that take away our ability to speak truth to power. These are all things that erode Canadian sovereignty, and they support post-nationalism. There has never been a more important bill to oppose than this one. For people who might have been affected by the small amount of lost Canadians, we had a bill in front of the Senate that would have addressed these issues years ago. But the Liberals expanded this far beyond the scope of what our colleague in that place try to do. The minister already has powers to rectify circumstances of citizenship. But what the Liberals are doing today in this bill, especially by gutting the amendments we put forward, is entrench that sense of post-nationalism in the country, erase our national identity, further erase our national identity, erode our pluralism, and further devalue Canadian citizenship. Colleagues, oftentimes in this place, we're tasked with the mundane details of program spending or different types of policy. But colleagues, we have to be tasked and seized with restoring Canada's national identity and restoring and protecting the value of Canadian citizenship. I implore colleagues to vote against this bill, to make the Liberals go back to the table and come forward with a bill that is narrow in scope. There are tools at their disposal that they could use to challenge court rulings. They have chosen not to. But the value of Canadian citizenship, our national identity, is worth something more than what is in front of us today. So colleagues, I implore you, vote against this bill and protect our heritage and protect the value of Canadian citizenship. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that the member get out into the community if she doesn't quite understand what a part of our Canadian identity is all about. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, this legislation adds, I would argue, value. The member talks. She's put a whole pile of stuff on the record. She talks about, for example, military spending, that we're not doing enough on military spending. Her leader actually went to 1%. We're bringing it to 2% with a goal of hitting 5%. She talks about not supporting allied countries. She and her government, or her Conservative Party, voted against the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement. She talks about infrastructure, and we're going to see a massive investment in infrastructure, no doubt, in the budget, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives, true to form, will vote against that. The question I have for the member is, does she not have an ounce of respect for the democratic process in which she...
Order. We need to provide time for a response. The Honourable Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
I'm so proud to stand here and reject Liberal post-nationalism, reject everything that the Liberals have done to erode the value of citizenship, erode the value of our democratic institutions, and fight. I will stand here and fight for what is right. My colleague opposite has a lot of shame to wear for all the years that he stood by and actively helped erode our national identity, erode our military, erode our national institutions. He stands up in here day after day and says, yeah, it's okay that the Liberals upheld this court ruling on. They haven't even come out and talked about the child pornography ruling. And I have been out in the community, Mr. Speaker. I see a Canada that has been reft apart by levels of crime I've never seen before, hunger, loss of affordability, and loss of the Canadian national dream. We need to restore that, and that's what Conservatives will do.
I thank my honourable colleague for her incredible speech, really outlining how since the 1970s, successive Liberal governments have worked very hard to dismantle a national identity in Canada and the obvious detriment that has caused in society. My question to her is in regards to what's happening in citizenships through the courts with those who are not yet citizens in Canada but are seeking to become citizens and break the law. I think we're seeing concerning things that have been happening after 10 years of influence on our court system, and that they are making excuses and having lighter sentences for people who are breaking Canadian law in order for them to become Canadian citizens. Can she comment on that?
Yeah, member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Parliament is supreme. We have the right to make laws in this place. That's what parliamentarians need to re-embrace after a decade of Liberal government acquiescing to the courts in nonsensical rulings like the ones that they should have appealed in this bill that was precipitated this bill, but also the Supreme Court ruling that said that there should be no mandatory minimum sentences for child pornography. Across political stripe, we had Premier Wab Kinew of the NDP in Manitoba say that this was a ridiculous ruling, all the way to the UCP Premier in Alberta saying that this ruling needed to be appealed. Part of Canada's national identity and protecting it has to be, and protecting our pluralism, has to be protecting Canada's democratic institutions, which includes the supremacy of Parliament. It includes us challenging court rulings. We have to get back to our roots in so many different ways in order to restore those ties that bind us together as Canadians, that allow a pluralism to flourish. And if we don't do that, the collapse of this country is inevitable.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am so sick and tired of this Canada is broken narrative from the Conservative Party. I'm a proud Canadian, as is everyone in my riding. My family tree goes back to Laura Secord and the United Empire Loyalists, and growing up and living in Hamilton, where the Battle of Stony Creek was one of the defining battles that kept Canada Canadian and part of the British Empire. So I will not be lectured on Canadian identity by the Conservative Party of Canada. My question here is, do these Conservatives have no shame? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill. Order. Order.
Wow. That's big talk from somebody who ran for a party that's pulled down all of the statues of the leaders of our country. Yep. That's tough talk from a guy who ran for a party that was rooted in post-nationalism, that supports disgusting rulings like no mandatory minimums for child pornography. Do they have no shame? These guys don't have any shame. But Conservatives will always fight for our country, for shared national identity, rooted in things like respect for the rule of law, responsibilities associated with Canadian citizenship, for affordable budgets, for an affordable life. That's what we're fighting for. And I think my colleague opposite needs to check himself on the shame meter today. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. La députée de Shefford.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Calgary Nose Hill for her speech. And in fact, we traveled together as part of the Interparliamentary Union, and we tried to explain who we are at committee. Well, my colleague touched on the matter of language in her speech, but what is the impact of having rejected the amendments that the Bloc Québécois Conservatives brought forward at committee, especially on the issue of language? And why were these amendments rejected in this bill?
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
There's the practical aspects of the rejection of the language amendment, and then there's the more macro level impact. Practically, by rejecting the language requirement, somebody could be an adult, gain citizenship through descent, and not be able to speak one of Canada's official languages. And my colleagues opposite are mocking that. And to me, that goes to the macro level narrative, which is the Liberals do not believe there is a national identity, and they don't believe in the importance of language rights. By rejecting this amendment, they are sending a signal that it's okay to gain citizenship by descent as an adult without being able to speak one of Canada's official languages. How can we be unified as a nation if we can't speak, if there isn't a requirement to speak one of Canada's 2 official languages? How can we continue to respect Canada's how we operate if that's not in place? You know, my colleague, she mentioned we've traveled together with the Interparliamentary Union before, and traveling with her has given me a lot of insight into why French language rights are so important in Quebec. She helped me rediscover my family history too, and how language rights have impacted me. And I have to say that by rejecting this amendment, the Liberals have sent a strong signal that they don't give a rip about language rights, and that they don't believe that language is an integral part of Canadian national identity or the responsibilities of Canadian citizens.
God damn it, that's not news! What about us?
These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
We'll wrap it up right there, gang. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe, get notified. We work really hard at this channel. I know it comes off as a conservative channel. I'm not that. I'm a voter. I just want the direction, the course to be corrected for our country. It's been going downhill for a long period of time. It's not by mistake. It's not negligence. It's a well thought out plan to line the pockets of very rich people, make them richer on your coin. I'm not going to try to sell you a sticker. I would appreciate you to consider subscribing. We cover Canadian federal politics in the trenches, the House of Commons, the committee meetings, the scrums on Parliament Hill. We cover legacy media too. That's it. But we're not trying to dupe you. We're trying to learn myself and share what I'm learning. That's it. Like, share, subscribe, get notified. Come and join us for one of the live shows. We've got one of the best chat rooms I know it's fun. I enjoy it every day. That's it. Come and verify that for yourself. Anyhow, Aaron, Canadian Looney, thank you for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one, right here in the trenches with Canadian federal politics. Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.